Welcome to Gold Coast Insider, where we bring you business insights, stories, opportunities, and forecasts from movers and shakers across the Gold Coast. I'm your host, Estelle Rodiguero. I'm CEO of Regional Development Australia Gold Coast. My two guests today are Professor Chris Fleming and Professor Nick Barter. Now, Nick is the Professor of Strategy and Sustainability at Griffith Business School in Brisbane. Completing his doctorate at the University of St Andrews, his career has spanned industry and academia, strategy consulting with EY to lead Griffith MBA to advising organisations on moving past myopic approaches. Chris is the Professor of Economics at Griffith Business School in Brisbane, completing his doctorate at the University of Queensland. His career has spanned public sector, academia, leading the Griffith MBA and industry, providing advice on economic frameworks that align with our lived reality. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for coming today and speaking with us.
Thank you.
Okay. So the reason I've got you on today is because you're both co-authors of a book called Future Normal, 8 Questions to Create Businesses Your Children Will Be Proud of. So congratulations first off. So I think you started this book, you launched the book on the 30th of November, 2023. So what inspired you to write the book?
The book's been quite a journey. We were both teaching into the Griffith MBA, and I think at the time Nick might have been the director or I was the director. But the MBA was really focused on sustainability, and Nick had given me a very loose manuscript based on a concept that he had developed while at EY as a consultant. He gave me this very loose manuscript around the very broad idea. I jumped on a plane. I was flying to Melbourne, from Brisbane to Melbourne, and I read it cover to cover on the plane. Got off the plane and basically rang Nick and said, "We've got to work on this. We've got to turn this into a book. This thing has legs." So that was sort of the beginning of us working together on what has ultimately become this book.
Right. So you were both teaching MBA, correct?
Yes.
So this is a result of having taught it. You could see a future. You could see a diversion in the future. Or you could see the needs which needed addressing. Is that correct?
A little bit different. I think what I think I've always had is a very different view on conventional business theory, and we'd really brought that into the MBA, and with a view that our MBA that we were teaching on has been recognised as that. But one of the things we were pushing on there when we were pushing against convention was also this notion of how do we tell this story to more people more of the time. And I think that and also, teaching students is great, but also you want to advise companies, you want to advise CEOs, and we wanted to expand the conversation we were having. And I think that was one of the big ideas around the book. And Chris always says nicely about the price of a book versus the price of an MBA. So
so we felt that we were really achieving some great things with the MBA, but the reality is not everybody wants to spend a few years of their life at $50,000 on a degree, right? And we felt a book was a much more accessible, obviously much lower price point entry, just to get these ideas in more people's hands. That was the really sort of, I guess, the motivation, because I think we could all look at the world around us and say, well, actually, a lot of our leaders in business could do with a little bit of a pivot in terms of the way they view their organisation and the way it impacts the rest of us.
So I'm excited to get into the book. But before I do, what was the journey like conceptualising, planning, drafting and editing the book? It took you 4 years, did it?
Yeah, that's a bit embarrassing when you say it out loud. But,
I think it sounds good.
We basically sat in a sort of a meeting room with a lot of big sticky pieces of paper that could fit on the wall, and whiteboarded or papered it out, if you like. So threw ideas at the wall.
We had 20.
We did have 20.
We had 20 questions when we started, and then we got it to. One editor said, "You got to get this down."
Yeah.
And we were like,
it was becoming War and Peace, was it?
It was a bit, yeah, it was heading in that direction. And so, yeah, because we landed on 8, which we feels a good number.
Yep.
But it was a lot of weekends in a room and years around, really. Yeah.
So you mentioned 8, and so there's 8 questions at the core of this book, which are underpinned by 3 big ideas. Okay, let's start with those 3 big ideas.
Okay, those 3 big ideas are the first one really is businesses are the tools we use to shape our world, and that's there because we're having this conversation on Zoom, so private enterprises enabled that. We're sitting wearing clothes, all enabled by private enterprise. We will go on holidays enabled by businesses, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're really trying to bring forward the fact that businesses are much more important in shaping our world, how we live, what we want, etc., than purely making money machines, which is how conventional theory deals with them and how we can be sometimes tricked into thinking about them.
Yeah, and that's because, I guess, for me was a transition in thinking, because I came out of public policy, and my initial thinking around particularly sort of social and environmental sustainability was this idea that if we got the policy sitting right, so everything else would follow, right? If we could get the policy sitting sorted out. And it was therefore I was putting it on government's shoulders to fix these problems. But from teaching the MBA, the more I taught the MBA and the more I interacted with people working in the private sector, it became pretty apparent to me that really it is business that needs to lead the charge.
So that first big idea is businesses are the tools we use to shape our world. The second big idea was long-term business value is optimized when society thrives. And that's really, the logic of that is you want to make money over the long term, make sure the society that your business is part of is thriving over the long term. And then the last one is the questions you ask matter. Do you want to just pick up on that one and the curiosity?
Yeah, so we deliberately framed the book around questions, because we felt questions weren't as confrontational as statements. Questions promote conversations. And then hopefully questions promote curiosity as well. So it was a very deliberate choice to always focus. I know we started with 20, ended at 8, but it was always going to be a book centered on core questions.
So how do you see businesses transforming to future normal businesses within the next 5 or 10 years? Can I backtrack on that? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I come into what is that concept and definition of future normal? Let's start there.
Okay. Future normal business we define as one that acts meaningfully in its surroundings and purposely to benefit itself and society. And so I think the term act meaningfully means it's considered, it understands its impacts, it understands how it impacts society, the world around us. And that's why we use the term surroundings. We're not fans of the word environment. We think, the environment is everywhere. If we went all the way and we'd go talk about how we ate it this morning, we're breathing it right now, etc. And so we think surroundings is a much better term. And then purposefully is, again, meaningfully and purposely is about acting, almost to a degree, very consciously about how the organization can succeed, but how it can make sure it benefits society as well. So we define a future normal business as one that acts meaningfully in its surroundings and purposely to benefit itself and society.
Right. So everything around, net zero, diversity, equity, and inclusion, these are all big buzzwords now. And these are all things that businesses now have to ensure that they're going down that direction, right? And that's for everything. That's for tendering, that's for, and also consumers are much more conscious, aren't they, of what they're buying and what the history of what they're buying is. So you've gone one step further, I think. So what I understand is part of this book is to look at what are you leaving your children? What are you leaving the people post your time in those businesses? How are you developing a business which is responsible and relates to the changing environment of businesses? Is that correct? Can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I might go back to sort of the earlier part of that point. And in the definition, we've deliberately included the phrase to benefit themselves. So the idea is not for the company or the organization to give up on making a return and only be a selfless actor for the benefits of society, but also to benefit itself. And that's because, as you alluded to, organizations are getting pressure from everywhere to act differently, to be better, whether it's from their shareholders, their customers, from government, and from employees. I mean, there's a lot of evidence out there that employees want to work for organizations that have values that align with theirs, right? And so there's a lot of pressure on businesses to operate in this way. And we're trying to give them a guide on how you can really lead in that space and how you can think long term. And thinking long term is really the beginning of all of it. Forget about those quarterly reportings and always just try and sort of a maximize return quarter by quarter, because we argue that's not going to lead to long-term success for your organization, not in the current context.
Mm-hmm. So does your book balance like the commercial aspect for businesses and that whole responsible governance, I think it is, as well? So, they are commercial entities first and foremost. And, how does the book marry those two concepts together? And does it do that?
Yeah, we certainly try to. But I think we look at it in the other direction. So we say, look, you get everything else right.
Yeah.
In terms of your impact and your position and the signals you're sending out, and the money will follow.
Yep.
So rather than money first and then worry about impact first. And there's plenty of examples, I think, out there where you can point to, well, customers will be attracted to you, employers will want to work for you, and they're less likely to leave. And we all know staff turnover is a massive cost for an organization. So we would argue if you get these other things right, the money will essentially be an outcome of that behavior.
That's really interesting. And Nick, what you said earlier was interesting about how we always think of businesses being commercial and, we go and buy things, but businesses are more than that, aren't they? They set our world. They set what I wear. They set what we do, what we eat. I've not looked at businesses like that. They're fundamental to who and what we are sitting here today.
That's right. They to a degree set where we live, because how much we get paid means how far away do we have to live, et cetera, which dictates your commute and all sorts of things. And I think, and then there's so much evidence, not that we talk about this in the book, but there's so much evidence about people talking about how their bosses are one of the biggest stresses in their lives, et cetera, et cetera. So work is really important and really integrated in our lives. And we don't, in that regard, we see work and life as completely entwined, and that's businesses and life completely entwined. And I think what we're doing then is saying, actually, there's something that goes with work that perhaps was hiding in plain sight, which is a different level of responsibility than we might otherwise have thought in terms of it. Businesses, the tools we use to shape our world. And then with that, we drag this notion of generational thinking, and we think about a generation that's 30 years, and we pose a generation through the notion children, really. And that kind of conversation. One of the reasons we got there was because there's some of the CEOs we spoke to, we talked about what was called the Greta Thunberg test. So, and this is very much where a few of the CEOs we're speaking to were finding that they were sitting at the dinner table and their teenage children were quizzing them about what their organizations were doing, climate change in particular at that time, and struggling with the answers to that question. And so part of our work and part of what's embedded in the book is playing around that notion of how do you have a conversation about your business with the next generation, which actually makes them think, yeah, you're doing the right thing. And part of this also appeals to that innate notion, innate humanness that we all have. All of us want, at some level, some kind of legacy. And most of us want, at some level, some kind of positive legacy.
Yep.
As we say on the back of the book, I don't get to write my legacy. Chris doesn't get to write his. You don't get to write yours. That's written by other people. And so we're trying to also bring that notion of, because you don't get to write your legacy, you have to think differently about your business, and you have to ask different questions about your business. So
It's really interesting. So coming back to a question I asked earlier, was how do you see businesses transforming into the future normal businesses within the next 5 or 10 years? Like, is this going to be like this fundamental, great big change businesses have to make?
I think it would be great if it was. I think we have to see what Barter. So
Okay, and find out. Yeah.
that cheeky responses aside, Chris.
Yeah, look, I think it's what is most important is that we get started.
Yeah.
And I mean, outside of teaching the MBA and writing the book, we also do a lot of work with corporates on strategy and more now is that work is focused around following through the questions in the book. And one of the things we tell the C-suite and the people we're working with is just get started. Right? People don't expect you to go from being a conventional business to the perfect business overnight.
Yeah.
People accept that it's a journey and will always be a journey. And as long as you're honest about that process, consumers, employers, shareholders, etc., will be patient and they will forgive you and they will support you. And so we often say, look, start now, start early, get some quick wins. So do some easy things that don't cost a lot in terms of financial outlay, but you can demonstrate an improvement. That allows other people to buy into the journey and buy into the dream, and just stay on the journey. We don't expect you to be perfect, but we need to move in that direction.
Yeah, it's fundamental that they do. What do you hope readers will take away from your book? And I guess that pretty well you've answered that in a way, but let's clarify that answer.
Oh, well, I've had the joy of speaking to, because the book's been out, a few people have told me that they've read it and what it's made them do. And one of the most recent conversations was somebody saying they kept reading a bit and then putting the book down and then pondering what was being said and thinking more deeply about what was being said. So I think, and that was actually great to hear, because that's kind of many messages in a book, but one of the messages was think more deeply about your business and what it's capable of and what it's doing. And I've had a little bit of feedback about that. So I'd like that to be part of what people take away from the book.
And I guess part of that is starting that conversation, isn't it? It's about putting that conversation on the table.
Yeah, 100%. That's hence the questions. Let's have a conversation. Let's think a little bit differently about the way we operate our business, the purpose of operating our business, and so forth.
Yeah.
It's very easy to fall into that trap of go to work and just do what you did yesterday.
Absolutely.
And so we're hoping this book will get people to stop, think, and reset.
Yep. Yeah. So having written this book, is this embedded in the MBA now that you're delivering? And that's a bit of an open question. So the question really is, how does the Griffith MBA integrate sustainability into the curriculum? And I was also going to add to that, in what role do the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals play in shaping the program's direction?
Oh gosh,
I know, it's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah. So the book is not central to the MBA.
Okay.
The way that you framed it. The book is emerged from mine and Chris's workings in the MBA, but when you teach a course, you teach something slightly differently to how you might write a book like this, particularly a book like this, which is designed for a professional audience. So I think somebody came and did some study with me and Chris on the MBA, they would they'd read the book, they'd quickly be able to make the connection. But prima facie, I don't think it's that connection if you hadn't read the book. But a lot of what we teach echoes and speaks. They would speak to each other. Then regarding the SDGs, the SDGs came about in 2015. I think they're due to run out at the moment in 2030. What we teach on the MBA, I think, silly within the piece that I cover, is we teach what is sustainability. your understanding of the depth of thinking required to understand sustainability. And then the SDGs are seen very much as a way of actioning quite a shapeless idea, which sustainability can be. And then I think if you speak to the current MBA director, the SDGs would then populate across different elements of the 12 courses in the MBA. So I think that probably, I hope that answers some of your question there. But yeah.
Because I think, Chris, I also met one of your students back some time ago. And they were really, I was absolutely impressed. I don't know if you can talk to that about that student, but absolutely impressed by that student and about the sustainability course that she was undertaking and how that evolved as part of her, her responsibility. She felt a real responsibility into that sustainability and diversity.
So that was at Rachel.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, that was Nick's course she was really talking about. So perhaps Nick can. Something there, but,
there's more. Wait, there's more.
But I think all of our students gain a lot out of the program. In terms of that alignment with the book that Nick was briefly talking about, I think the general ethos of the program, the MBA program, and the book are aligned.
Yeah.
And certainly in our courses, we'll probably mention the book once or twice as we go through. But yeah, Rachel's been a fantastic. I think she's now a graduate of the program.
Yeah. She works with Gold Coast World Economic Forum Shapers. And then I think you've interviewed another one of our students as well, a lady called Claire Burns from Bond University. She studied. I remember teaching.
Yeah, so do I. She was in one of my classes a few years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. So this may be a hard question, but I'm here to pose some hard questions to you. Can you provide examples of real world applications of the values driven leadership taught at the Griffith MBA program?
Look, I guess I see it in our graduates.
Yeah.
When they finish the program and go back into their organizations, and we hear sort of anecdotal stories of things they've changed within their organization. And look, I'm not going to mention any names just in case it's a bit sensitive, but there was a transport company that has now invested very heavily in electric trucks and in ways of recharging those trucks through solar, renewable energy. Largely because of the impetus of one of our graduates who had a senior management position in that firm. I know there's an aged care provider that has a person who's now a sustainability manager in that firm who's one of our graduates, and they're pushing it in that direction as well. So what we find is that our graduates do end up having a real influence on the organizations in which they work.
Yeah.
Sometimes they change organizations because they feel that their current employer is not aligned with their values now. And sometimes they move into roles that allow them to push that agenda further forward. So I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence we can pick up just through conversations. We have regular sort of what we call MBA for life, so regular alumni events where graduates come and we meet each other again, and it's always amazing to hear about their journey post the program.
Yeah. You're both lecturing. Is there more impact? Have you seen a greater awareness in your students of that whole net zero sustainability? Has that become a really core?
100%.
100%, is it?
So I guess I've been teaching it's embarrassing to say, but I've been teaching the MBA now for about 15 years. And in the early years, there wasn't an awareness, but it was a little bit about a fear of, if we go down the sustainability path that you're sort of teaching us about, how will my boss, how will customers, how will shareholders react? So there was a fear of that journey. That's completely changed. Students now come into the program going, we have to go in this direction, help me do it.
But also, I think they used to come in and go, "Is climate change real?"
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we don't get that nearly as
Yeah, we don't go into that anymore.
no.
No, that one's gone. So, what distinguishes this book from other business strategies or leadership books in terms of its approach and focus? I think you've almost answered that in one respect, but the focus and the approach. I love the approach that it's done in questions, because if I'm reading something and I'm trying to learn or absorb, if it's done in questions, I find that really easy. I go, okay, that's clear, it's defined. The answer's going to respond to that. So what makes it different is what distinguishes the book.
Okay, where you go?
I think the first thing, two things which are covered in the first part of the book, which before we get into the questions, because the way the book is set up, it talks about how, obviously an introduction, but then it talks about how history haunts our present. And but then it also talks about frames up how we operate in the world. And so two things I would say: the book is deeply human,
Right.
and the book is challenging of conventional theory. And I think what makes it really different is it actually allows people to move past conventional mindset of businesses, which is a dehumanized place, that a dehumanized organization that doesn't exist anywhere in the world, and then actually looks those things square in the eye and embraces them. And so I think if you're a business leader or a member of an organization, and you're thinking that there's that little bell in your head that goes, this organization doesn't quite get it somehow, this book speaks to that.
Mm.
And I think it speaks to that just because it actually puts us humans front and center.
And I think also, just because of our background, both professors in, economics and strategy, I think we're able to go at that sort of underlying business theory that has lost its usefulness, right? It was a theory. The theories were essentially developed post-World War II in the United States. The world's population was about a quarter of what it is now. Greenhouse gas concentrations were well below 350 parts per million. And therefore, maybe those theories were suitable for that context, and we might even question that. But we're arguing that they're really not suitable for now, and we kind of lay out why we don't think they're suitable for now.
Actually,
I think there's the practicality of having taught a lot of practitioners through the MBA,
Yep.
with a little bit of depth of theory that I guess our academic backgrounds can bring to it.
But you've also had private industry experience, which I'm preempting that the book has been written in English and not academic, so that anyone.
We tried our best.
That's always a pivotal thing, isn't it? So that we can all understand it. No, well done, and you're absolutely right. Everything evolves. And what we haven't recognised is that the teachings from 10 years ago and the lessons and the way we do business 10 years ago isn't pertinent in this environment. And it's moving rapidly, isn't it, guys? Like, will you see yourself having to rewrite this or sort of add to it in 2 years' time or 12 months' time? Because the world is evolving at a rapid pace and things change. COVID's taught us things change overnight.
Yeah, and we can change, right? We can. I mean, COVID taught us that we can adapt rapidly if we want. If there's sufficient external pressure to do so, we will.
Yeah.
Look, we're up for a second edition.
I think
November.
Not this year. Not this.
No.
our ideas as well.
Yeah. We
need to extend the kind of conversation that we started as well. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on writing the book. It's called Future Normal: 8 Questions to Create Businesses Your Children Will Be Proud of. And I will make sure I put the link at the bottom of everything that we've done so that people can actually link and chat and talk to you and have that discussion. But it's been really interesting talking to you today, and good luck with your book.
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for listening today. For a complete list of podcast episodes and transcripts, go to rdagoldcoast.org.au/podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter.